In this video, I want to talk about the blessing of generational differences. And the reason I want to speak about this is because the current climate of the nation, there's a lot of division, people dividing over a variety of things. And one of them is generational perspective. You have baby boomer generation saying one thing, Generation X saying another thing, Generation Y saying something else, and then you got even younger generations, like the millennial generation, the really young millennials, speaking a different thing. And I want to share from a biblical perspective of how generations are a blessing and not a hassle or a curse. I mean, they all work, and sometimes there are disagreements, but this is for, it's practical, because when you have two different views, you're always going to have some type of disagreements. But in the book of Exodus, when the Lord, the Most High, sent Moses to Egypt, he sent him into a specific generation. And when Moses came there and they weathered through and finally moved out of captivity, they went on their way. And eventually it came to a point where the Most High had spoken to a certain generation. He had become frustrated with a certain generation. And he told them, you will be in the wilderness for 40 years. And he said, the next generation will go on into the promised land. Now, Moshe was in that generation that was not going to go into the promised land. Now, I want to talk about that because some people have the mindset that an older generation or previous generation loses value because the situation and circumstances change that are needed for the future. And I don't believe that. I believe that if it wasn't for the generation that, listened to Moses during the Passover when the death angel came, listen to Moses and all the other instructions that were given while they were there in captivity in Egypt, and they were going back and forth in war with Pharaoh. They listened, and then they proceeded and they went through the Red Sea, and then there was a whole new set of challenges because you got a whole nation of people coming out of captivity, having to learn how to live outside of captivity, and that created a bunch of problems. And that's something their generation had to deal with. And because they dealt with it in the 40 year, the next generation went on to the promised land. And then that generation had its own differences and issues and things they had to come over or overcome. And then that next generation, the Most High says that he is the God of generations and that he visits the third and fourth generation upon those who hate him. He says he will bless the third and fourth generation. He says all kinds of things throughout the scripture concerning generations. So next time you are hearing something, consider if it is a generational difference that's causing a disagreement, because there's something that everybody from each generation can learn from one another, because the world is constantly changing. And there are things sometimes in the present that are absent, that were present that were in the past, valuable things that you have to go back into the past and bring into the present. And sometimes there are things that come into the present that weren't there in the past that are valuable, that can be taken on into the future. So never look down upon another generation. Never think you're better, think you're wiser, smarter, all that. Never get down on somebody because they sound different. We're supposed to sound different. We're supposed to look different. Bless you.
Very good.